Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Please like and subscribe. In this episode, we dive deep into the minds of the person who is being gang stalked. Now, in this episode, we look at their mind and see how being under constant surveillance or having someone constantly hack into their phone, let's say, for example, or PC, how that can rewire their brain into being more vigilant and more clear minded as to what is going on around them. The average person may not understand what's going on and they may not see certain signs that something or someone is watching them. So that leaves them basically out there to become victims and not know what's really going on around them. But someone who's being gang stalked can actually rewire their brain for the positive and be more aware of their surroundings. And then when, let's say, dangerous situations come up, they're able to navigate those situations a lot more clearly and be able to escape those situations safely. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Thanks.
When we normally talk about things like prolonged stress or trauma, the conversation usually goes straight to the damage, right?
Yeah, the focus is almost always on deficits, pathology, the negative fallout.
And look, that perspective is vital, it's real. But today, we want to push past that a bit because our sources are suggesting something, well, profoundly different, maybe even adaptive.
Exactly. We're doing a deep dive into this idea that facing continuous, really high-stakes threat, the kind that fundamentally changes your reality, it might not just be destructive, it could actually be a catalyst for what some researchers are calling adaptive neurospecialization.
Meaning your brain doesn't just get damaged, it actively reorganizes itself for survival.
Ruthlessly.
Mhm.
And in doing that, it can emerge with some pretty surprising specialized strengths.
Okay, so that's our mission today, to unpack this whole reorganization process.
That's the plan. We want to look at how the brain's incredible neuroplasticity, when it's put under that kind of chronic pressure, tunes certain cognitive functions towards what you might call adaptive expertise.
Right, so we'll look at the actual structural changes.
Yep, the structures, the biological mechanisms driving it all, and crucially, how this specialized rewiring actually shows up, how it manifests as real-world skills, especially in those high-stakes careers.
Okay, let's unpack this then, because we're talking about a major overhaul, architecturally speaking.
It's not just, things shutting down. It's more like a strategic reallocation of resources.
Like closing down some departments to pour everything into the command center.
That's a great analogy. And probably the biggest change is on that main highway between the prefrontal cortex, the PFC, and the amygdala.
The PFC being the brain's CEO,
Yeah.
right? Planning, judgment.
Exactly. Complex decisions, long-term stuff, impulse control.
Hmm.
But under chronic threat, the sources confirm something called dendritic atrophy there.
Atrophy, so it shrinks back.
The branches prune back. Yeah, it's
Wow.
like the brain decides, look, complex long-range planning, that's a luxury we can't afford right now. Survival first.
Okay, so strategic planning gets sidelined. But if the PFC loses resources, where do they go?
They get rerouted straight to the amygdala, the threat detector.
Ah, and that part grows?
It experiences hypertrophy, yes.
Okay.
It grows, strengthens its connections. And this shift is fast, it's dramatic. What it creates is this almost instantaneous threat detection bias. Hypervigilance, but it's more than just anxiety.
It's like a skill.
It's a neurological capacity.
Mhm.
The ability to spot really subtle environmental threats, tiny shifts in someone's behavior, a potential crisis way off in the periphery, much faster than someone without that experience.
But wait, if the PFC is shrinking back, doesn't that mean you lose some crucial decision-making ability? What's the trade-off? That sounds problematic.
Well, it is a trade-off. That's
Yeah.
the key.
Yeah.
You definitely lose some capacity for the low-stakes, long-term abstract thinking you need for, say, a stable, predictable routine.
Okay.
But what you gain is efficiency in high-stakes, immediate decision-making. The brain is optimizing for surviving chaos, not for comfort and predictability.
And that's where we see it turn into expertise.
Exactly. That specialized pattern recognition gets leveraged in careers like security, intelligence analysis, certain kinds of investigations. Anywhere anticipating the next move is absolutely critical.
Makes sense. Okay, what else is changing structurally?
Well, moving on from the amygdala, There's the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC. It plays a really interesting role. What happens is the ACC strengthens the links between emotional regulation networks and executive function networks.
So it's tying feeling and doing closer together rapidly.
Pretty much. It doesn't necessarily make you calmer, maybe, but it makes you react more effectively to emotional signals, your own and others.
The goal isn't perfect calm then, but better reactions.
Enhanced air monitoring, rapid behavioral adjustment. Survivors often show this superior ability to quickly realize, okay, that approach isn't working, I need to pivot now.
And you see this in the real world.
Oh yeah. The sources connect this adaptive flexibility to examples like people who survived really volatile childhoods, sometimes becoming incredibly skilled conflict mediators.
Because they've neurologically learned how to read and navigate those situations super fast.
Exactly. They're experts by necessity.
Okay, and we have to touch on the hippocampus memory, right? That often takes a hit under stress.
It does, yes. Initial volume reduction is often reported, but the deeper insight seems to be that the brain develops contextual memory specialization.
Meaning?
It gets incredibly efficient. It prioritizes remembering vividly every single threat-related detail, which is obviously crucial for survival, for avoidance. But at the same time, it filters out huge amounts of irrelevant, mundane data.
So not a perfect memory, but an optimized one, focused on threats.
A threat-focused memory system, precisely, optimized for survival.
All right, so that's the structural reorganization. Pretty profound. But now let's talk about what's actually powering this rapid rebuild. How does this happen so fast?
Yeah, this is where the biology gets really compelling. It seems stress doesn't just rearrange things, it actually accelerates skill acquisition, but only in these specific high-stakes areas. One major factor is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. Prolonged adversity triggers an upregulation and increase of BDNF, but specifically within those survival critical circuits we talked about.
BDNF, that's like the miracle grow for the brain, isn't it? Promotes neuron growth.
That's the common analogy, yeah. It helps grow new neurons and connections.
Okay, but wait. Stress usually makes us think of cognitive fog, paralysis, right? How is it accelerating learning and growth? Is there a cost?
The cost is specificity. That's the key. The brain is pouring that BDNF, that energy, into skills directly related to managing threats.
Oh, okay.
So this stress-induced neurogenesis speeds up skill learning specifically in environments defined by high risk, high pressure. It's part of why you might see, say, combat veterans transition so effectively into really demanding roles like emergency medicine or technical rescue.
Their brains are sort of chemically primed to learn faster under pressure.
Primed to acquire the skills needed to save lives under duress, often faster than someone operating under normal baseline conditions.
And this adaptation goes even deeper than brain chemistry, right? Down to the genetic level. Epigenetics. That sounds complex.
It is complex, but the basic idea is manageable. We're talking about changes in DNA methylation. Think of the FKBP5 gene, for example.
Methylation. That doesn't change the DNA itself, does it?
No, exactly. Think of your genes like sheet music. Methylation doesn't change the notes, but it changes the volume knob. It affects how loudly a gene is expressed.
Okay.
And in this case, it helps create what's called a stress-responsive phenotype.
Oh, what now?
A stress-responsive phenotype, basically a biological profile that's tuned for stress. And here's the really revolutionary insight from the sources. These individuals often develop a kind of tolerance mechanism where they don't just cope with pressure, they actually perform better cognitively when they're under pressure compared to when things are stable and routine.
Wow. So their peak performance is actually unlocked by high stakes, when others might be falling apart.
That seems to be the case for some. You need the threat, the pressure, to access their optimal functioning. It completely flips the script on how we usually think about performing under pressure.
Totally. Okay, what else? Any other mechanisms?
One more key one, the default mode network, or DMN.
That's the network active when we're zoning out, mind wandering.
Exactly. Relaxing, reflecting, self-referential thought, sometimes rumination too, unfortunately.
And in survivors.
You often see reduced DMN activity compared to baseline populations.
Which means they're less likely to get stuck in their own heads, worrying or planning mundane stuff when there's an external crisis.
Precisely. That suppression of the DMN allows for incredible focus on the crisis at hand. When things go sideways, the brain just cuts out the internal noise, the self-doubt, the mental to-do lists, the what-ifs, and locks onto the critical, immediate task.
And that kind of focus is invaluable.
Invaluable. Think of trauma surgeons, bomb disposal experts, firefighters, people who need absolute unwavering focus in the middle of chaos. It's a trait their brains have honed.
Okay, we've covered the deep structural changes, the biological fuel speeding things up. Now let's connect the dots. What does this look like in the real world? How does this specialization actually manifest as expertise?
Yeah, the sources lay this out really clearly with what they call adaptive expertise mapping. It shows how the neural basis translates directly into specific, often valuable skills.
Give us an example.
Okay, take that amygdala PFC hyperconnectivity we talked about earlier. The resulting expertise is threat anticipation.
So someone who lived through, say, a really unstable environment.
Exactly. They walk into a new situation, and their brain immediately starts mapping the potential risks. It's almost automatic.
Like a security analyst who just feels something is wrong seconds before anyone else spots the actual breach. Because their brain's pattern recognition for threat is just faster.
That's a perfect example. It's not analytical in that moment.
Mm.
It's deeply ingrained hypervigilance turned into a professional asset.
Okay, what else?
Or think about physical endurance. The sources mention sensitization in the descending opioid system.
Which means,
Practically speaking, often a significantly higher tolerance for pain or extreme discomfort.
making them well suited for.
Emergency response, search and rescue, maybe even elite athletics. Roles where you absolutely have to push past normal physical limits under duress.
Then there's reading people, right? That nonverbal speed.
Right, micro-expression reading. The neural basis seems to be specialization in the fusiform gyrus. That's the part of the brain big on recognizing faces and objects.
So years of having to instantly decode subtle facial cues because danger depended on it.
Means they become incredibly adept at reading intent, often faster than the average person. Think high-stakes negotiation, investigative psychology, maybe even complex sales. Anywhere, understanding the other person deeply is key.
And finally, improvisation, because things rarely go to plan in chaos.
Absolutely. Situational improvisation. This seems linked to enhanced plasticity in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex.
So these are the people who, when the plan completely falls apart,
They don't freeze. They instantly start generating a new, workable solution on the fly. You see this a lot in fields like entrepreneurship, agility as survival, or combat medicine, where you're constantly adapting to limited resources and evolving threats.
it really paints a picture, doesn't it?
It does. All these examples underline the idea that these brains are, in a very real sense, wired for crisis. They haven't just bounced back from adversity, they've specialized because of it. And that specialization can be a real professional edge.
Okay, pulling back for the bigger picture now, the sources bring up something really important here, a kind of nuance called the resilience paradox.
Yes, indeed. Recent work highlights this idea that survivors often develop two distinct competencies, which can actually be conflicting but are both potent.
Okay, what are they?
Well, competency one is that survival-optimized cognition. We've spent most of our time on the fast, automatic, threat-focused processing, the brain wired for chaos.
Yeah.
But competency two is what you might call post-trauma wisdom. This is often an enhanced capacity for empathy, for complex meaning-making, maybe a deeper existential clarity that can emerge after intense struggle and reflection.
So you end up with this hyper-alert, fast-reacting survival machine, but it's paired with a really deep philosophical, meaning-seeking perspective. Sounds like that could create some internal friction.
It absolutely can, and that duality really explains the paradox. It explains why someone might absolutely thrive when they're dropped into a high-stakes, dynamic environment like a crisis zone, a fast-growing startup, an ER,
Yeah.
right? But then they might really struggle in a stable, routine, low-threat job or life setting. The everyday world doesn't necessarily require or reward their specific neurological setup. It might even feel wrong.
So the hypervigilance that makes you a brilliant intelligence analyst might make sitting through a boring Monday morning meeting feel almost unbearable.
Exactly. The adaptation itself becomes maladaptive when the context shifts back to safety or routine.
The brain's running these complex threat detection algorithms, but in a safe environment, there's no input, so it just generates anxiety.
Or difficulty focusing on mundane things, yeah. And sometimes, maybe even a subconscious pullback towards chaos, simply because that's the environment their brain is now optimized for.
Wow. That is a powerful fundamental reframing, moving away from just seeing pathology.
It is.
And that leads us right to the core insight, which was captured so well by Dr. Karen E. Smith. Can you share that quote?
Yes, it's striking. What looks like pathology in a classroom may be evolutionary expertise in a war zone. The same brain that misfires in safety excels in chaos.
That really sums it all up, doesn't it? And it throws down a challenge, I think, to society. How do we stop defaulting to this deficit view.
And start actively looking for, identifying, and maybe even harnessing the expertise that chronic stress can forge.
So to wrap up our deep dive today, we've really pushed towards this reconceptualization, haven't we? Seeing chronic stress response not solely as damage, but as this adaptive neurospecialization.
Yeah, and thinking about it that way really opens up entirely new possibilities, new ways to utilize, maybe even honor, and integrate the specialized strengths that survivors often possess, especially in critical roles.
And it seems the research community is moving in this direction too, beyond just treatment towards strategic leveraging.
Definitely. We're starting to see emerging fields like chronotherapy,
Which is?
the idea of timing therapeutic interventions very precisely to capitalize on those stress-induced plasticity windows we talked about, times when the brain is already sort of primed for rapid change,
Interesting.
and things like precision resilience training, using advanced tools like fMRI neurofeedback to help people consciously strengthen those key adaptive pathways, like between the ACC and the amygdala, giving them more control over their specialized system.
And they're even looking at animals.
Yeah, cross-species validation. Comparing human trauma responses with stress adaptations in wild animals, they mentioned urban coyotes, for example, animals that have developed specific neurological profiles allowing them to thrive in really volatile, high-pressure urban settings.
Fascinating. So the final question for you, listen in. What does all this mean? If these specialized traits are essentially highly optimized survival skills forged under intense pressure.
Then what responsibility might organizations, military corporations, emergency services, you name it, have?
Right. A responsibility to actually place these crisis-wired individuals into roles where their specific neurological adaptations aren't just tolerated, but are actually valued, where they can truly excel.
Instead of trying to force fit them back into routine boxes that maybe just don't match their unique expertise anymore.
Something to think about. What stands out to you?